So good morning. Thank you so much, Dr. Dar, for having me. Just to thank you and BluePaz for putting this on, and certainly being blessed and honored to be with everybody today. I know there's a lot of things people could be doing on a Friday morning, but thanks for being here. And BluePaz to be able to bring no-cost solution to first responders and really be in the forefront of educating first responders is so important. So thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen and we'll get moving here.
Just a reminder, Chief, if you were going to use sound, to go back in and turn your sound on.
Okay.
It's in the share box.
All right, I think it's on.
Perfect.
If not, you'll stop me and let me know.
Yes, sir.
All right, sounds good. Again, thanks everybody for being here this morning. And my name is Neil Gang. I'm the police chief out in Pinole, California. Pinole is right outside of San Francisco. It's a small little town in the Bay Area. But the reason why I bring that up is because just being able to speak here and be able to present this provides such a great opportunity. And I've always contended that one person, right, can change the world. Mother Teresa, Gandhi, they could change the world. So certainly you sitting here today listening to this presentation could go back to your organization and change the culture of your organization. And that's what we need. We need leadership to step up right now, identify that we have a problem, attack that problem head on, and then try and bring solutions to the issues. So thanks so much for being here this morning. So we'll start. A couple of things I have to do right off the bat is give some disclaimers. Number one, I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Just many years in this profession, a lot of experiences and just learning from everybody, networking and learning. And today I'm going to bring hopefully a solution that maybe you can utilize. It's a multifaceted, multi-targeted approach that will help you address building a culture in your organization of wellness as opposed to just a wellness program. Now, a lot of people ask me, what's the difference between a culture of wellness and a wellness program? Well, I contend that it could be just you, the leadership of your organization. You're going to decide whether or not you just have a wellness program that's going to check off a box that you could say you have a wellness program, or you're going to build a real culture in your wellness, in your organization. So it could just be you listening to this today. That is the difference between a culture and a program. Again, I'm not a licensed therapist, and certainly what I want to say today is a lot of times I go across the country and I speak, and they say, "Oh, what is this guy from California going to teach us?" And certainly California gets a bad rap, and a lot of times maybe so, and it's probably warranted. But what I want to say is today, this is just a guidebook. This is certainly not a map. It's not a roadmap for you to follow. It's not a manual. What I always say is it's a way. It's not necessarily the way, but it's certainly a way to help you address building that culture in your organization. So thanks again for being here this morning. And I'll share with you this, and I want you to think about this for a moment. Organizational wellness is a journey. It's not a destination. Understanding what we're building out today may need to be changed tomorrow. We all live in flexible and ever-changing environments that we're facing right now, particularly in law enforcement. And I know we have firefighter brothers out there, so thank you very much for being here as well, and EMTs. So all first responders, we're facing changing environments. So understanding that and keeping that in your mind, that where we may be today, we may have to adjust, be flexible, be adaptable, and move in another direction. So again, that concept of it's a journey, this is not a destination. So I always start with this, and if you're at home or you're in the office, ask yourself this question. When it comes to organizational wellness, where is your organization right now? And I know it's difficult, I can't see anybody right now, but it'd be nice to know what those numbers are. And I'll share with you some numbers. I just came back from Virginia Beach yesterday, and I shared some numbers from that presentation. And typically what we find out are people are around the 3 or 4 range. Very rarely will you get somebody 7 or higher. So if you think about that, keep that in mind where you are today. The reason why I want you to do that is because I'm hoping at the end of the day, we can at least move you up a couple of notches, because I think it will give you some tangible ideas and tangible concepts that you can use when you go back to your organizations. So again, think about that number and be honest with yourself and figure out where is your organization on a scale of 1 to 10 today. So why are we all here this morning? Again, 8 o'clock in the morning for some of us. You probably could be doing a lot of different things on Friday, but I have something that's going to show you and maybe just kind of build a framework of why we're here today. So please indulge me. This is about a 3-minute video, but I think it's really, really important to build that platform. So we're ready to start.
I went to a really dark place in my mind where suicide became an option. I was going through a divorce. I had lost a lot of relationships with people, and I was isolating.
While I was trying to heal from the traumas that had put me in the position that I was in, I suddenly lost all the support of all the guys I worked with.
Yeah, shots fired. Shots fired on both the roof.
I felt guilty that he died. About 15 minutes in, I'm just listening, and all you can hear is just people screaming. I was only 2 years into my career with Boston at this point.
I was so hypervigilant, and I couldn't shut my brain off.
They told me that I had PTSD and that they would give me some pills that would basically remove me from my feelings.
First responders are the toughest of the tough. They're the strongest of the strong, the most resilient people in our society. And they heroically sign up for these very, very difficult jobs in which, as a society, we outsource all of our trauma to them.
I remember the moment I was like, okay, I was up all night. It was just trauma after trauma after trauma. You know, the novelty of the job wore off really quick.
I couldn't think of how to get help without ruining my job.
There's a stigma in the profession that creates a barrier, a stigma in their agencies that prevents them from getting the help they need.
I didn't have somebody to talk to. I didn't have somebody that understood.
There was a part of me that said, okay, pick up the phone, call this person. This is how you're going to get yourself out of this skillfully and safely.
I look back at that period of my life, and I just felt so completely, utterly isolated.
My ego wants to stop me from doing that. It wants to tell me, you got this. You don't need to let anybody know that this is going on.
And that's why I didn't know where to turn. And I beat myself up because I thought I am such a mess. And I'm the only one.
I have 4 years till retirement, and I got to be okay, and I got to make it.
Right now, our profession is being challenged. We're going through a really, really difficult season. There's no time like the present where officer wellness has to be your number one priority. We have to do a better job as leadership in our profession to understand that is what we're dealing with, people. And I think it's really important that that is our number one resource, and when that it has to be our number one priority moving forward if we want to change this profession.
We're just coming into our second year now of really teaching structured training in wellness, mental health to the firefighter academy. Okay, I'm open to trying something different. If you had told me 4 years ago or 3 years ago I was doing yoga, I'd have laughed in your face. If I could plant seeds throughout the state of wellness, we'll get out there and start permeating and changing the culture.
And so much better when you have really amazing people in your life that you can walk through this stuff with. You don't have to do it alone.
So as you see, this faces all of us, firefighters, EMTs, dispatchers, police officers. It's something we need to address. It's something that I believe that the profession has done a really poor job historically of addressing. And in fact, I think that the profession has actually chewed people up and spit them out. And I think it's time we change that. We focus on making them the number one priority and understanding that we're dealing with human beings and we need to prioritize their health if we expect anything else to occur in our professions. So again, what's important about this video is that what you see are people, right? These aren't actors. These are people in your organization. They're probably people that are right working with you, going through the same things that you're going through. And understanding that that's this guy's story or that person's story, but everybody has stories. And if you've been in this profession for any length of time, you're going to have similar very stories and experiences as these people on the screen. So understand that. And that's why I think that's why we're here. And it gives a little bit of foundation of where to start from today. So let me share with this here, current trends. So right off the bat, I have to apologize because it is a little bit more focused on the law enforcement side. However, trying to get data from the fire side was a little bit more difficult. I do work with the firefighters. I was the interim fire chief here in Pinole for 9 months, and really gave me a new eye, a new perspective working in the fire services, really like, you know what? They're facing the same things we're facing in the law enforcement side, same challenges, and we need to do something better in the fire service as well. So here's a couple of trends for you to think about. Every 44 to 46 hours, an officer dies by suicide. So think in your head for a moment, like 2 days ago, from 2 days ago to today, where were you? Well, during that time, someone in our nation, wearing our badge, wearing our patch, died by suicide. Nationwide in 2019, law enforcement lost approximately 239 officers to suicide. If you see the asterisk there, there's a purpose behind that. They say that the experts are saying that that's underreported by a factor of 2.5. So can you imagine those numbers? That would be over 500 officers around the country die by suicide. Now, I don't know where you are in your space today, but a lot of times we do these presentations in a large space and we think about it for a moment. I have people let it resonate with them for a minute. Imagine looking around the room and seeing 500 officers all in uniform who have died by suicide. Now, understanding that the fire service is very, very reflective of what the law enforcement service is seeing. We are losing almost double the number of officers and firefighters to suicide than all other line of duty deaths combined. So think about that for a minute. Losing firefighters in fires, collisions, officers who's died in traffic collisions and shootings and having medical issues. We're over here, and our employees that are dying by suicide are up here. We need to do something. The time is now. We need to do something. We have to do proactive, and we need to address this problem. In 2020, we lost 174 officers to suicide, and already in 2021, 104 officers have died by suicide. Now, I did a look back, and in 2017, there was a study done, and the firefighter services was the same numbers. The numbers were trending in the same way. Double the amount of firefighters were dying by suicide than in line of duty deaths. So think about that for a moment. We all sign up for these public safety jobs, right, to be first responders. We inherently know these are going to be dangerous jobs that we face. We know that we may or may not come home at night, right? That's something we do. We serve our communities. We have servant hearts, and that's what we do. We sign up for that. But do we sign up to face PTSD, depression, suicide? The fact now, going to an academy or a fire service academy and saying you're more likely to die by suicide than in a line of duty is alarming. But the facts are there and it's true. So this is what I'm going to do. And I can't see anybody. It's difficult to engage. And a lot of times I ask in large audiences to take out your cell phone at this time. And when I ask a question, if the answer is yes, then I ask you to light your cell phone and hold it up. By the time my 3 questions are over, the entire room is lit up like a night sky. So I'm going to ask you to do this. And you don't have to raise your hand, obviously. I don't think we have the ability to thumbs up. Do we have the ability to thumbs up? Okay.
I believe they do, but we can't see their photos. I think you might be able to see it in the chat though.
Okay.
There we go. We got a hand raise. That's what we got. So.
Okay, so that's good. So maybe you could raise your hands just to kind of engage with each other. But let me ask the first question. If you personally know somebody who died by suicide, raise your hand. And you see the numbers are going up, right? We're at 50 participants are saying that they know somebody who died by suicide, now over 50. And then I usually ask them to keep your hand raised. And then I say, if you have somebody in your own organization that died by suicide, raise your hand. So we raise our hands, we look around the room and we see that there's a large number of people that have people in your organization that died by suicide or that know somebody who died by suicide. And you imagine the room now being lit up with some lights. And then the last question I ask them is, lift up your phone, turn on your light. If you know somebody right now, as you're sitting here today, that pops into your mind that may be struggling, whether it's alcohol addiction, opioid addiction, from pain medication, from an on-job injury, whether they have finance problems, maybe they're drinking too much or have relationship problems. And I ask them to raise your hand or turn on your light. And typically the room is 80 to 90% lit up. And then my question is to you, if somebody popped into your head today, what are you doing about it? And if you're a leader in your organization and someone popped into your mind, what are you doing about it to change that? Are we reaching out? Are we getting them services? Are we even having the courage to ask them, are you okay? Because, you know, see, we had no problems talking about a lot of different things, but this is something that traditionally we've had a problem talking about. And we need to be able to have the courage to stop and ask people how they're doing. And I don't mean passing by the hallway, how are you doing? Fine, see you later. But actually actively listening and asking them how they're doing. Look into their eyes and asking them if they're okay. And that's the things we need to do. So as you see, thank you very much for the people that participated with the raising of the hands. But thank you so much. But I think it just illustrates the importance of what we're doing and how important this is. So what's the primary purpose? What's the primary purpose of us as first responders? So if you know Gordon Graham at all, Gordon Graham does a lot of speaking. He's been speaking for many, many years. He surveyed thousands of officers and he came up with this conclusion. He said the primary purpose for first responders is this, the preservation of life. Right? If you get to a fire call, you have to preserve life, right? We try and get people out of the houses. There's the heroic stuff going on every day. Officers, even if you're in an officer involved shooting, right? What's the number one thing they criticize? Did you try and preserve that life, regardless if they were a suspect or not? Right? So preservation of life has been considered the number one purpose in public safety. And a lot of times I ask the question and it's engaging and people say, well, we're here to help people. Yes, all those things as well, but this is the number one purpose. So how are we doing? Outstanding, we're doing excellent work, right? You hear stories of firefighters heroically entering into homes, pulling people from homes from fires, at car collisions, saving people's lives, doing CPR, all those things, officers going out there and saving drowning babies. There's so many excellent examples of work going on externally. But my question to you is now is, how are we doing internally? Internally, we need help. The data's there. The numbers are showing that we're not doing very well when it comes to preserving our own officers. If our employees are dying at almost double the rate by suicide than they are in the line of duty deaths, then we have to do more. Now, I certainly believe that we've done a great job over the last several years. I mean, sometimes we need to really celebrate our successes. We are moving the needle, but so much more needs to be done. And that's why I think we're all here today to serve this cause, and so proud and blessed again to be with you and for BluePaz to take this on and for us to move forward and educate people on how to do that. So here's the number. This is a trauma in law enforcement. And I imagine that the fire service is very, very same. They say that in a career, an average officer will have 188 major traumatic events. 188. Now, in comparison, someone's personal life, a citizen, has about maybe 5, right? 5 or 6 major traumatic events. Could you imagine 188 major traumatic events? Now, if you think about it, there's 2 different ways to kind of look at this. One is that you're carrying a wheelbarrow, and every single time there's a traumatic event, someone puts a brick in that wheelbarrow. And then there's another traumatic event, and sooner or later, you just cannot lift that. It's so heavy and it ends, topples over. The other one is a basket. And every single time there's a traumatic event, you put that egg in that basket. Well, sooner or later, there's just no more room for those eggs. And that's why this next is an important piece. There's a white paper by Jessica Dockstetter out of San Diego. And here's what the conclusion said. And I think it's really, really important to hear this, and I'll repeat it again. Cumulative trauma over time will lead the person to be more aggressive to themselves and others. Again, cumulative trauma, and I made a mistake. Cumulative trauma over time that goes untreated will lead the person to be more aggressive to themselves and others. So do we wonder why our profession is seeing the results that it's seeing? It makes sense. Because how many of us have that built into our record keeping? You know, how many traumatic events this officer had or this firefighter had in a short amount of time? And then what are we doing? So we have that basket of eggs, and what are we doing to take those baskets out? So we need to find ways to meet with culturally competent partners to help us do that. When we put an egg in, we got to find a way to get that egg out. I don't know how you're seeing it in your parts of the country or where you are, but we're seeing rises in, like I said, suicide. We're seeing rises in domestic violence with first responders. And if you look at that study, that makes sense. Again, cumulative trauma that goes untreated will lead the person to be more aggressive to themselves and others. So it makes sense. The data's there, the study's there. We just have to work together and partner for solutions.
Chief, can you say again who that white paper was from?
Yes, Jessica Dockstetter, Doctadder. And if anybody needs that white paper, I have it. I can email it to everybody afterwards.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So here's just an illustration for us. And you say it says officer suicides, but I mean, it's first responders, firefighters, the same thing. So the tip of the iceberg is the suicides. But the more damage and the greater part of what's going on is the warning signs underneath the level, right? It's the trauma, the PTSD, the divorces, the isolation, the insomnia. Now, I'm sure none of this happens in any of our first responders, right? Alcoholism, there's no alcohol in our profession, right? Depression, anger, all these things, all these warning signs, this is where we need to really attack the problem, because the result is going to be the result. But I really want to submit that we have to find strategic ways of attacking the warning signs. And I think that's what we'll talk about a little bit today. And I think that the BluePaz First Responder Conference is talking and educating people how to do all that. But it's really, really important that we attack the warning signs. So here's some things, we talk about human behind the badge and fire services as well. We're just human beings. So again, here's some suspected causes. We talked about the white paper already, but our personnel is so used to being the ones summoned for assistance that we don't even know how to ask for assistance. We don't know who to call. We don't even know what that looks like for us. So it's really, really difficult for our employees to do that. But we have to understand that as leaders, we need to be able to make that an easy process for them. Years of history and tradition where we're tough, right? We don't need to ask for assistance. If we ask for assistance, it's a sign of weakness. We need to get away from that type of leadership and those type of conversations. But that's the way most of us entered this profession, where we were told that, right? And the other part for law enforcement is easy access to firearms. So that's a no-brainer. Again, understanding that we're just humans behind the badge, and many of us have loving hearts behind that badge is really, really important. So we're all susceptible to the same life challenges as everybody else in our society, right? We have financial problems, we have addiction issues, and we have relationship issues. So I think that's what is driving the numbers to where they're at. So here's a study. This came out of New York. It came out of the PERF symposium back in April of 2009. The FOP, which is it's the largest POA in the nation on the East Coast. They did a survey of 8,000 officers, and what they said is that officers nationwide said that stress on the job impacted their mental health. They said that 90% of the people surveyed said that there's a barrier or a stigma for them to seek help. Whether, again, it's the I feel I'm weak, or people think I'm weak if I ask for help, whether or not they're going to be sent to light duty for quote unquote a fit for duty test. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. But again, there's a barrier. And if this is what our people are telling us, then we have to address these and try and break down those barriers, or if you will, smash the stigma, which we'll talk about in the next few slides. The other thing I want that's not on here, it's really, really important to understand. And I'm going to put a caveat out there. I'm going to make a statement here. It doesn't mean that all EAP programs are bad. There's very good EAP programs. There's very good EAP practitioners, and certainly, definitely culturally competent EAP partners. But overwhelmingly across the nation, our employees think EAP doesn't stand for Employees Assistance Program, but it actually stands for Expose and Punish. Expose and Punish, that's why they don't want to reach out. They feel it's going to be connected to the PD. The HR is going to get a report back. The chief's going to get a report back. That's the reason why they're reluctant. Historically, some of our EAP programs have been weak and have been underserved by them. So I think it's really important. Again, there's some great programs out there, and I don't want to discourage people from using EAP. But we also have to understand that EAP is one avenue And if us as leaders are going to sit back and say, you know what, I have an EAP program, that's my officer wellness strategy, you're going to lose some people, because you have to have some other approach besides the EAP and give people different avenues to seek assistance. Smash the stigma. I know now it's getting cliche, but let's talk about that a little bit, what that looks like. Because many conferences I sit at, everybody goes, we have to smash the stigma, but no one ever dives deeper and says, oh, how are we going to do that as a profession? So here's some things. Here's the challenges, right? Years of tradition and history in our profession where you ask for help, that you're a weak person, or maybe you're not fit for duty. Again, we have to get rid of that. We need to educate our employees on the need for sleep. It's such an important thing, right? Sleep deprivation and what that does to our body. The science behind trauma, adrenaline, and depression, and the effects that it will take on our body. Understanding that there's a lot of officers and a lot of firefighters that are out there that do have some signs of depression, or maybe even have some suicidal idealizations, but understanding that that's not a problem. It happens, but we just got to find ways to get people past that and let them seek assistance when they do have those things. And here's something that I believe in. I think we have to have a paradigm switch. I think we have to speak of these as stress injuries and call them PTSIs, injuries, as opposed to disorder. I don't know any first responder that walks around and go, hey, you have a disorder, and that's really accepted, and they're really happy about that. But I think that if we start talking about these things as injuries and they're treatable, then maybe we can have a paradigm switch and people won't be afraid to ask for help. Like, so we'll sit in our briefings, I'm sure around the firehouse, it's around the table, and we talk about the fact that I hurt my knee, I tore my ligament, and you know what? I need to get surgery. I need to get scoped, I'll be rehabbed, and I'll be back at it, right? I'll be back bigger and stronger than I was before. The same thing can happen with these injuries. They're brain injuries. But we have to change the mindset of what that looks like, because people are not talking about these things, but they should be able to talk about this just like they talk about any other injury. And the other thing I think will help is, how about we start calling these mental health coaches as opposed to therapists? Therapists just over the years has had a really bad connotation and just doesn't sound right. Hey, I think you're really struggling, you go see a therapist. How about the fact you have a brain injury? We're going to send you to a mental health coach. You're going to rehab and you can come back to work. No, I'm not saying this is the solution to everything, but I think it's at least a step in the right direction and something for us to think about, and maybe kind of think maybe that's a new way about using the vernaculars and the verbiage of that these are not life or career-ending incidences, that we can get through this, we can be treatable, competent people can help you, and you can get back to work and do the profession that you love. So everybody goes, well, what does officer wellness connect to? And again, I apologize to the EMTs, the first responders, but to the military, but put your profession in the middle of this. So I'll go around the country and I speak about this thing, and the officers go, well, we just don't really understand why it's so important. And I said, you know what, as officers, and I'm sure firefighters the same way, we're kinesthetic, right? We need to see diagrams and pictures, and if I could develop a pop-up book for this, I would, but obviously that would be really, really difficult. So we develop a model kind of just to help people visualize why it's so important. So what does officer wellness connect to? I think it connects to everything. I think everything we want to do in the fire services and the police services connects to officer wellness. I mean, or employee wellness, excuse me. We need people willing to wear the badge and patch and are healthy enough to do the jobs we need them to do. Otherwise, everything falls apart. So you're in law enforcement right now and you're going through this really, really difficult season where we need police reform. Yes, it's important. But if we're not going to address officer wellness as our number one priority, how do we ever expect police reform to occur? And I'm sure the fire services is the same way. So here's the model. Now, if you look at it and say, okay, officer wellness is the core of who we are, right? It's our soul of our being. What connects to it? And if you really sit down and go through this exercise with maybe groups in your police departments or your fire services, sit down and say, what does it connect to and why is it so important? And here are some examples. Police reform, like I said, I think without officer wellness, you'll never reach police reform. How about attitude and morale? Do we think attitude and morale has anything to do with someone's officer wellness? Of course it does. But our traditional first line supervisor classes and leadership classes in our professions never talk about the wellness side of it. You have somebody with a bad attitude, bad morale, what do? We discipline them, we write them up. That's not what we need to do. I believe we need to get to the why, right? Simon Sinek talks about it. Let's get to the why they have a bad attitude, why they have morale. Yes, it takes more time. Yes, it takes more courage for the leader to get engaged with their people, but the time is now, we need to do it. How about performance? How many times have we written people up or gave them a bad evaluation because of performance? Have we ever sat down with that person to find out why their performance is not to where it needs to be or not meeting expectations? Do we know maybe they're dealing with an illness in their family? Maybe they're having financial problems that causes the performance to dip. Again, getting to the why, getting to the officer wellness and why things are occurring. So instead of just addressing the outside rung of items, getting to the core to figure out why things are happening. Poor conduct, again, right back to officer wellness. How about attendance? I was in a presentation not too long ago, and a guy came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, Chief, I got a guy who's always out, and our organization made us write him up." I go, "Did you sit down and talk to him? Did you ask him why he's always late, or maybe he can't make it in?" You know what I was told? What they said to me is, though, we don't have those conversations with our employees because our administration told us that's a HIPAA violation. I go, "What, a HIPAA violation?" I go, "Clearly that's not a HIPAA violation, nor is it somebody who really understands what HIPAA is about. You're not asking them what their blood work is or what their medical conditions are. You're asking why they're late to work." We can ask them, we could be human beings, and as leaders, we need to be human beings, something that maybe our predecessors didn't do so well. But now it's the time that we have to do that and display vulnerability and be human and talk to our people. So you know what I did? I got an email not too long ago from this gentleman. He said, I asked the person, you know what he said? He was going through a divorce. He actually had to take his kids to school in the morning. He had to get them dressed. He had to get them bathed. He had to get them fed and then drop them off at school before he ever came to work. And he said, sometimes that's challenging. You know what? Because life happens. And life happens to all of us. But without him sitting down and having that courageous conversation with that individual, this guy would have kept getting written up, maybe suspended. So again, getting back to the officer wellness, getting to the why. Shooting errors and increased uses of force. We talked about the white paper. Again, cumulative trauma over time that goes untreated will leave us to be more aggressive to ourselves and others. Yet we'll deal with employees about the use of force increases, right? The red flags when it comes to that. But do we ever sit down and go, okay, we need to reduce the trauma so we can reduce the use of forces? Sitting down and issuing discipline is not going to change the use of force patterns. We need to sit down and figure out how we're going to reduce the trauma so we can make this person healthy so they can be effective for our organization. And then again, relationships. I think that's a no-brainer. Obviously, people that are struggling relationships, there's some kind of officer wellness that is affecting them. And again, we talk about relationships, internal and external. You know, back in the day, you used to say, leave your work life at work and leave your home life at home. That doesn't work. All right. If we can't compartmentalize like that, it's impossible. So to think that we're not going to be bothered at work about things that are going on in our personal life, that's incorrect. And vice versa. So that's why that we really think that officer wellness is the glue that puts this all together. And if we address that, we'll be able to help relationships as well. So again, you can go to your organization and you could add 20 of these different categories. And I would encourage you to go as a leadership group to do that and identify different areas. Many times when we do a smaller group, we do this as an engagement tool and we have people come up with their own. But think about that and maybe use this in your organization to help build awareness. So now we get to Officer Rosinski. This is Asher Rosinski. Asher Rosinski and I worked together down in South Florida back in the 90s. This gentleman was a decorated Marine, a father of two, just a generally good guy, constantly working. This guy really cared about his appearance. His creases had creases. This guy would wash his take-home car once a day. And in fact, was so anal about the cleanliness of his car, would armor his floorboards and also his brake pedals and his accelerator. It was unbelievable. This guy really cared about being an officer. He wanted to be his officer his whole life. Well, one morning, it's around 4 or 5 in the morning, the phone rings in my house. And I pick up the phone, and I got some guy screaming on the phone. He's saying, Asher is dead. Asher is dead. And then one more time, he says, Asher is dead. So a total of 3 times before I could even get a word out. I'm still processing this. I'm thinking, who is this guy? Are they drunk? What are they talking about? I go, we didn't work that night, right? He was a teammate of mine. We worked on the same squad. We didn't work. So what is he talking about? And then as time set in a little bit, I started, oh, maybe he worked an off-duty job, you know, and inherently, this is a dangerous job. Maybe he died in the line of duty serving our community. He goes, no, you don't understand. He shot himself. I said, what? What do you mean he shot himself? So think about to the 90s. No one was talking about police suicide back then. It was something we never even thought about. Yet here we are. I'm getting a phone call in the early morning hours that my good friend in a wedding, went to academy with him, has now been lost to suicide. And then he shared with me one extra tidbit of information that he had. He said he actually shot himself in the chest. He said he went out to the Everglades in his police cruiser, loaded up all his equipment. His trunk looked like a military locker, took his service weapon, sat in his car, put the firearm to his chest, and pulled the trigger. Now, does that show you that this guy cared about what is even his appearance in the afterlife? That is, if you know anything about suicide, that is not a typical way for a male to die by suicide. It's very typical of a female. So that's why it was so important that, hey, you know what? What is going on here? We need to find out what happened. So fast forward to the next day, we go to briefing. I go into the police briefing room and I'm waiting for, you know, to be greet with chaplains. I'm waiting for the chief to be there. I'm waiting for, you know, CISM team, CIT, whatever, all the resources that are possible. And I walk into the room and there's nobody in there. Sergeant's not in there. The room's kind of quiet. There's 3 or 4 people in there. The seat where Asher sat was empty. And I'm waiting for them to come out. I think maybe they're in the sergeant's office. Maybe they're all going to come out together to come up with a strategy and how we're going to discuss this and how we're going to get through this all as a family. Sergeant comes out, he sits out in front, he gives a briefing, gives out our meal periods, gives out our times, just like a regular day. And at the end goes, does anybody have any questions? And I'm sitting in my chair, and I was a newer officer back then. I'm sitting in my chair and I go, yeah, I got a lot of questions. But again, didn't have the courage to actually raise my hand and say, yeah, I have questions. We leave the room, we go get our equipment. And I remember walking down the stairs and going to my police car that day. And I'm going, this is not right. Our brother in blue, less than 24 hours, just killed himself. And we're not even having a discussion about this. We're not talking about it. We're not even discussing the arrangements. And what was important to understand is Asher was a devout Jewish man. And this was a Thursday morning that this occurred. Well, if you know anything about the Jewish religion, he had to be buried by the Sabbath of the Friday. So we had one day to process this, get arrangements together, and then bury our friend. I remember going out to my car and I remember sitting back in my police car that day. And I go, if I ever get an opportunity to be in a leadership position and do something to change this, I'm going to do it. So this sat with me for years and years and years. It's been inside my heart. It's been a passion of mine, this officer wellness. Why? How are we going to change these things? And this has resonated with me for such a long time. And I said, you know what? It's time, when I saw these numbers creeping up, that I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write a model that's going to be multifaceted, multi-targeted approach. I'm going to be able to help people create a culture in their organization of wellness. Now, again, the most impactful thing happened to me in that briefing that day in my entire over 30-year career. And I wish I could talk to you right now and I'd ask you what you think it was. So I'll ask you, but think to yourself, what do you think the most impactful thing in over 33 years of law enforcement happened in that briefing that day? And if your answer was nothing, you're absolutely right. Nothing. No resources, no discussions. And I learned a lot about police organizations. I learned a lot about the bureaucracy of being in a first responder organization. And I said, I will never, ever allow somebody to suffer through what I suffered through because of a lack of wanting to step up or lack of knowledge. So I put this model together and I'm going to share it with you today. It's called the Asher model, and it's in remembrance of my friend, Asher Rosinski. See, what you see in front of you is the Asher model. And it's a multi-targeted, multifaceted approach to help us build a culture of wellness in our organizations. And I'm going to go over this quickly, and then I'm more than happy to stay on after, or even if you want to reach out and discuss more. Now, a lot of organizations after the presentation said, hey, can we use this model? And I say, yes, please use the model. And what they've asked is that they put their own badge and their own patch on, and they made it their own. They customized it to themselves. So if you need help with that, I'm more than happy to do that. And I encourage them to do it as a leadership exercise. Is you take the 7 points, and we'll go over them soon, but change the text a little bit. Go into your leadership meetings and build your own Asher model, but using the format and the template that's here. And if you're interested in doing that, I can help you through that process. So again, I believe it all starts with number 1, right? Awareness. We have to create an environment where it's okay to not be okay. Taking those conversations out of the shadows and into the open and saying, hey, we need to be vulnerable. We need to have these conversations. And it all starts at the top. The leadership has to adopt that philosophy and be the first ones to do that. You know, it always was, it's okay not to be okay, right? That's been the cliche for a couple of years now, but we'll add on to it, right? It's okay to not be okay, but we have to do something proactive to bring it back to okay. And then number 2 is having a solution-focused approach, whatever that looks like to you. There's some great apps that are out there. You know, I know Lighthouses in Arizona and Joe Ramirez are doing great work with their app. We have a Cortico app. There's several apps that are out there. So all I'm saying is have something where you have a solution-focused approach. And for me, the app is the way to do it. Giving people resources 24/7, 365 in the palm of their hands when they need it most is the most crucial aspect of having an app. They don't have to call out to anybody. They don't have to call dispatch. They don't have to call your peer support team. But having access when they need it most, confidential and anonymously. What's really important about that as a leader is if I have an officer or an employee who's out there who's struggling, and maybe they're drinking, maybe they just got into a fight with their spouse, they take their firearm out, now they're driving around thinking they're going to lose their job because they had a domestic violence situation. I want them to be able to reach out to competent people, competent therapists, culturally competent people to address their problems. Right? I don't want them to have to worry about calling the chief, calling our own peer support and exposing themselves, but I want them to have that resource in their hand when they need it most. And I think the app does that for people. And number 3 is a peer support team. Not just a peer support team, just check off a box and say you have a peer support team, but proactive, engaging peer support. Studies have shown that peer support is one of the number 1 proactive things you could do for your organization and your people. So create that proactive peer support team. Don't wait for the big one to occur, but have them text. You know, we have a lot of dispatchers on our peer support team, and when an officer goes to a traumatic call, they just send a text. I know you just went to that baby drowning. How are you feeling? I know you said that bad car accident, bad domestic. Are you doing okay? If you need anything, let us know. Again, it's not the big one that's going to hit us. It's the little cumulative trauma over time, as the white paper has shown us. And the other thing that we did was we added a therapy dog onto that team. Now, you would think that the therapy dogs for our communities, and you know what, here's the little hint, it is, and we'll certainly sell it to our council people. But the bottom line is that dog is used 90% internally. And there's such an impact when you have a therapy dog that's able to do that. And there's a lot of competent partners out there that are willing to train and give you a therapy dog at their cost. So look for resources, network, and find those resources. Number 4 is resiliency, building resiliency, right? Educate your employees on what resiliency even is and what that looks like. Mindfulness and the importance of mindfulness and meditation. There's so many studies out there that it's such an important way to reduce trauma and keep our people healthy. We know the difference between PTSI and PTSD. Educate your people. Teach them on emotional intelligence and how important it is to have to be emotionally intelligent and have emotionally intelligent employees out on the streets. Talk about yoga for first responder. There's yoga nidra, there's first responder yoga, there's yoga 911. There's plenty of great culturally competent, meaning they understand our profession, first responders, that will teach you yoga. Now, if you're not a downward dog type person and all that and posing, there's something called yoga nidra, where it's more of a body scan and meditation yoga. There's something called I-rest yoga that's out there that's also helping and showing signs to reduce trauma. So again, building resiliency, teaching people what that looks like, teaching people how to take deep breathing exercises while they're going through traumatic events. So again, building out your resiliency program. And there's a lot of people out there that can come in and educate your people on that. And there's a lot of great work being done. Number 5 seems like a no-brainer for us, right? Healthy habits. Encourage physical fitness in your organization, encourage healthy habits. What we were able to do here, and I know in the fire service, you've been doing it for many years, but us on the law enforcement side have really struggled with being able to work out on duty. We were able to get that program passed out in our organization, and it's really, really important. Really important to give people a space to reduce those cortisol levels so they can be healthy. So we're not carrying trauma to trauma to trauma to each call we go on. So the first call you go on, you have a traumatic event. And by the end of the day, you're yelling and screaming at somebody for reporting a delayed theft because you carried that trauma from one call to another call. Finding ways to reduce that and working out on duty is a good way to do that. What we did is we allocated some funds, we built up our fitness facility, and now they can work out on duty. And it has a multiple purpose. One, time. Many of our employees don't live in the cities where they work. They commute an hour, they don't have time to go to a gym. Or conversely, they have time to go to the gym, but then they take away their family time. So you go home, say hello to your kids, see you later, I'm off to the gym, now you're gone for another hour, 2 hours. Think about that, building it out into your workday and how great that would be if you were able to do that. And the other thing we did is we realized that people eat like crap, right? When we're working first responders, especially when we're late, overtime, we're running through drive-throughs. What we do is we reach out to a culturally competent meal prep company who understands the profession. And what we did is they come in and they drop off meals, doesn't cost the organization any money. And what they do is they have a QR code and employees can go in there 24/7 and get good, healthy meals and be able to eat healthy. And we already know what the effects of that looks like. The other part of that is if when we have employees that are working, we have a lot of single parents out there that are working late hours that go home and have to feed their children. Isn't it nice you can just go into your own refrigerator in the organization, click a QR code, take home 3 or 4 meals to your family and be able to have meals without having to go home and cook. So think about those things and using some strategies to be able to help your people in that area. We also did one step further. We went out to our vending machine companies and said, get rid of all the junk that's in there. We want protein bars, we want nuts, we want some healthy snacks. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that you'll get a healthy meal out of a vending machine, but certainly if we take steps to improve, then we're one step towards a healthy environment. Spirituality, I'm going to kind of gloss over that a little bit because there's a lot of people that may feel uncomfortable talking about spirituality. I'm a man of faith, so I'm not. However, I do realize that it does make people feel uncomfortable. But at least build out a chaplain program. Build out a chaplain program where it's a part of the fabric of your organization. It's woven into that fabric. Not just bring the chaplain in where there's a problem, or when an officer is having a problem, have a chaplain ride along with them. Hey, why is the chaplain with Joe today? Right? Normalize it. Let them be there and they'll be part of the organization. And the other thing when it comes to spirituality, just understanding that just something greater than ourselves that is out there is important and changes your mindset. And number 7, maybe the most important, is family. Understanding that our families are going to be a part of our work life. Many of us have been in this profession for a long time, never had their families even at the police department, except for when they got sworn in. We get our families in from the orientation process forward, because the bottom line is we need them to champion our cause when people are at home. When our employees are at home is where the red flags are going to be. They're not going to be at work. When was the last time a leader walked down the hallway and say, hey, how you doing? How's everything going? Well, I'll let you know, Chief, I'm an alcoholic and I'm taking prescription medication. My life's going to crap. My wife just left me and I feel like killing myself. Yeah, that is never going to happen and hasn't happened. And we can't wait for those things to happen. But where will they be seen? At home. And we want spouses to feel comfortable, family members, daughters, sons, whoever, to be able to call the police department and say, hey, my loved one needs help. They're drinking a lot, they're staying on the couch, they're angry, whatever it may be. We want them to identify the red flags, champion our cause, and be able to reach out and get help and resources. The other thing I'll talk about is providing help when it comes to financial fitness. Our people are struggling when it comes to that. They do something called a psychological autopsy after a suicide. And a large majority of the suicides has a financial component. We need to educate our people what that looks like. Many of our people coming into our profession at young ages when they don't have the money or know how to manage the money that they're making. So everybody says, well, when do you do that, Chief? Well, I don't think it needs to be done at the academy, because I think that you're drinking from a fire hose at that point, right? They're just worried about the next code test or whatever they have to do to get out of the academy. And then they're worried about getting off their field training program. And then they're worried about getting off probation. But if you can put it into your system where at the minute they get off probation, you bring in financial advisors to help your 2-year employees so they can educate them on what deferred comp looks like. Many of our people don't even know what that means. They put $100 down on the form when they signed up and that was it. Educate them on deferred comp, on life insurances, on what the retirement looks like. So again, really, really important. And then the other thing we do is around the 15, 20-year mark is bring in specialists that can talk about retirement, financial retirement. Can everyone financially retire? What that's going to look like and how you're going to have to identify away from this badge, this patch, or the fire services, because it's not going to be the same when you retire, and you have to have hobbies outside this profession for you to be helpful. I mean, to be healthy. The bottom line is we're losing a lot of our retirees to suicide, and those numbers aren't being captured because there's no critical way to capture those numbers. But there's no way our profession should allow people to be in this profession, give their heart and soul for 20 years, and then lose them to suicide within a year or two outside the profession because they weren't prepared. So prepare your people. Again, strategic, right? Multifaceted approach will help us. And I'll be more than happy to express a little bit more on the ASHA model later on. If you reach out, I'll be more than happy to discuss this with you. Here's a QR scan. If you want the model, you can have that. Otherwise, I could send you a copy of that as well. I'm just checking on my time, and I think we got about 8, 9 minutes left. I'll tell you a story. So I put the ASHA model out, and then I got a phone call. I'm in my office one day, and my administrative assistant comes in on with a pink pad and says, "Hey, Lisa from South Florida is on the phone. She wants to talk to you." And I'm thinking to myself, okay, Lisa from South Florida. I go, I'm not calling any Lisa from South Florida back. I go, is there any last name? Right. I'm thinking, how many years has it been? Like, am I going to get in trouble? Like, I'm counting the numbers. I'm going, okay, well, probably beyond the child support type of issue. But so she comes back in about a half hour later. She goes, Lisa Rosinski. And I sat back in this chair right here and I go, wow, it kind of just was real impactful for me because I never reached out to her to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. So I pick up the phone, I make the phone call, and she answers the phone, and I'm waiting to get yelled at, or why didn't you call me, or why didn't you ask permission? And all I heard was tears, and then thanks. She said, "Thank you so much for not forgetting Asher. Thank you so much for doing something to raise awareness to his situation and what happened." See, because our profession shunned this lady. She said, "I've been trying to go to academies for years. I tried to go back to your old organization and talk to them, and no one would call me back because no one wanted to talk about suicide back then." So you can imagine this lady with a wealth of knowledge and experience that we all could learn from was shunned from our profession. It was sad. And I said, "You know what? I have to bring you out with me when I go to speak." And she said, "I would be more than willing to do that." Unfortunately, she can't be with us today, and she hasn't been able to go out to a lot of events because she has her life. But I said, could you put something together like 3 minutes, maybe to kind of just share your story and share what it looks like to be a survivor of suicide? And that, so it sounds so funny, right? Because we say survivors of suicide and people go, no, there's no survivors. The person died. No, for every suicide, there's survivors. There's a mom, there's a spouse, there's a child that survived this suicide that we have to help, that we have to understand is still part of our extended family that many times we are shunning and forgetting about. So listen to her story.
Hi, my name is Lisa Rosinski. Sorry I couldn't be there with you today. I lost my husband, Asher Rosinski, to suicide 22 years ago. My husband was a police officer just like you in Pembroke Pines, Florida. I was suddenly left alone then to raise 2 very young children, Matthew, age 3, and Sean, who was only 13 months old. When a peace officer dies in the line of duty, the department makes a big deal out of it, as they should. But when they lose someone to suicide, they treat it as very matter of fact. He was the first person in his department to die by suicide. No one knew what to say or do. The entire force came to his funeral, of course, but most of them disappeared after that, leaving me virtually alone while they went on with their lives. My life changed in an instant that day, and I was left with so much doubt. What could I have done? What should I have done? And what would I do now? Life as we knew it would never be the same for my kids, his and my family, and especially me. That is why I think it is so important that you spread the word and promote the ASHA model to all your departments. Chief Gang has done an amazing proactive 7-point approach to creating a culture of wellness to educate, offer support, and give solutions to those in need before it is too late. This incredible and important program offers resources Asher and I never had, solutions that may help prevent suicides and avoid a tragic event from ever happening. Chief Gang and I will soon be collaborating on a new project that addresses the aftermath of suicide and the impacts on survivors when the unthinkable happens. Stay tuned, and thank you for listening.
So she mentioned something, and I don't know if anybody caught it, but she said that everybody disappeared. What she told me was that within several months, all the officers were done. No one stopped by her house anymore. No one called her anymore. And probably the biggest tragedy is that within 2 weeks of Asher dying by suicide, she got a letter to come into the HR division of the city. And they gave her a letter. It says, "You are no longer insured by the city." This was a single mom of a 13-month-old and 18-month-old who was a stay-at-home mom that all of a sudden her life just turned upside down by the death of her husband. And then our thin blue line family cast her aside and told her, "You are no longer insured. Good luck." We can't do this. This cannot repeat itself. That's why we're going to start a program called The Aftermath to talk about these things so people are educated. And that's why I think it's so important that we talk about these. And then we have this Asher model to supply some resources for our people.
Hi,
So here's some emerging trends. I'm just going to go through this quickly because I want to finish so we have some time to have some question and answers. But here's some emerging trends in wellness. I think that this conference, you have some people talking about mindfulness. It's great. I can tell you right now, I had a hard time at first accepting the fact that mindfulness would be helpful. Being that I was a little bit apprehensive, I actually took a 3-week emergent class on mindfulness, and it changed my entire perspective. So educate yourself on mindfulness, go to these classes, understand what the need is for meditation and those things, and you'll find out that it's extremely helpful for our first responders. Deep breathing exercises, meditation. There's something right now that I'm working with now. It's called the science of awe, and I'm just going to touch on this because we could do a whole hour on this itself, but research it a little bit. But a science of awe is, it's a situation where when you look out like into the Grand Canyon or the Moab Desert, it's that feeling, that sense of awe that you get. But supposedly there's ways, and they're showing studies that having this imagery in your mind creates a sense of calmness, and it's actually reducing trauma. And we're going to try and do some things with this, and I'm going to try and incorporate this into first responders. And I'm working with a very competent doctor who has done some studies in the science of awe. And we're going to try and do some piloting programs using imagery and music to help reduce trauma throughout the day for our employees. So I really look forward maybe to coming back next year and being able to speak just on this and what we're doing. I don't want to share too much right now because it's really, really exciting, and it's certainly an emerging trend. And then, of course, yoga. And I believe you're having some yoga people coming in, Yoga 911, yoga for first responders. They're doing great things, and I really, really appreciate them. And I think they're doing tremendous proactive solutions to help our people reduce trauma and help them relax and understand the importance of health by doing yoga. Again, I talked about yoga nidra, yoga iris yoga as well. So here's my questions and answers, but I know we'll do that later. So I just want to talk about this for a minute. So over time, I've gone to a lot of presentations, and you go to them, and a lot of times the keynote speaker comes out and honestly just vomits trauma all over the audience. Vomits trauma, tells a sad story, and then we all walk away and go, okay, that was a sad story, but what next? And I said, if I'm going to go out and do presentations, I'm going to do something that's going to be everlasting and do something more so it resonates, not just in that session, but well beyond that session. And I said, how am I going to do this? And I go, you know what? Challenge coins, right? Particularly law enforcement, if it's black and shiny, you're a hit. I said, okay, I'm going to come up with a challenge coin. It looks like a challenge coin. It feels like a challenge coin, but what it is much different. What it is a conversation starter, and it's an icebreaker. And certainly you can go back to your organization and say, hey, I saw this presentation by this chief. I don't even know his name, but he gave me this coin and he talked about officer wellness. And just maybe that will break down that barrier for you to start that conversation with people in your organization. So if you're interested in one of these, I don't sell these. It's the only way to get them is to see a presentation. I apologize, I'm not with you today to be able to give you one, but if you reach out on LinkedIn, I'll give you that information later. I'll send you one. I don't ask for any money with this, but I ask for two things though. I ask for two things. Is one is do something different than you were doing before you saw this presentation when you get back. And number two, have at least one conversation about this coin and this presentation with somebody. And if you're willing to do that, I'll send you a coin. So thanks very much. So I'll end with this. I think we need to create the culture. I think we could be the solution. Again, remember I told you I'm a small little agency out in Pinole, California. No one's ever heard of me before. Yet now I'm on the national stage. I'm going around and have been blessed with the opportunity to go out and speak about these type of things. Go out there. You could be the difference. You could be the solution. I think we have to partner together to start a movement. And I think when we do all that stuff, we can change outcomes. And I'll end with this. If we do all that, hopefully our goal will be stopping police suicide and first responder suicide. So something our profession has not done very well for a long time is that's lead with love. We need to lead with our hearts, understanding that our human beings work for us. They're humans. They're our number one priority, and we have to invest in our human capital if we want to help change this profession. So again, lead with love. And this is my last quote. If you're a leader in the room today, be the leader that you would be inspired to follow. And I'll repeat it one more time. Be the leader that you would be inspired to follow. I'll say stay safe, healthy, and resilient. I've been really blessed to be with you today. Thank you so much. And if you want to connect on LinkedIn, here's my information. Thank you very much, Dr. Adara, BluePaz, for having me today. Really, really blessed to be with these amazing people that you're bringing together for this first responder conference. So thank you.
Chief, I don't know if anybody else could have as great an opening as that was. I thought last week was tremendous with my friend Dan Green, but wow, this stuff that you shared today from the heart. You know, as you were saying this stuff, my wife made a comment. She said, it is so impressive that Chief was not narcissistic and tried to name this after himself. He put this in honor of Asher. And I think that speaks volumes to the man that you are and for what your purpose and your cause and your mission is, that you have really gotten a lot of amazing traction on. So Asher is blessed to have you as a friend, man. And I'm grateful that you've never forgot where you came from and what you stand for, right? That's in the words of a friend of ours that passed recently, Dean Peterson. Never forget who you are and what you stand for. And I think that is super important. Chief, we have some questions and comments here that I'd like for us to get to. You probably are seeing them as well on your screen. One major one that I also had a question on because I think that is interesting. This is from an old co-worker of yours over in Scottsdale PD, Janice Samora. She asked, can you please expand on how your department incorporated working out on duty? I think that's a big one for police. Fire has had that forever. But tell us about that, please.
Yeah, so I'll correct you. I was in Surprise, Arizona for 12 years and very, very happy. And I know they're doing really well in Surprise and just happy to have that opportunity. But Scottsdale's got a great organization as well. And actually in my K-9 years was actually trained with Scottsdale. So nice. I appreciate Janice reaching out. So yeah, exactly. I think you hit the nail on the head, right? Fire's been doing this for many years, but law enforcement has not been doing this. So when I brought this over to my council at first, the first thing they said is no, right? HR said no. That was their answer. And I said, okay, why? Right? That whole why question. And they said, well, you just can't, because what happens if someone gets hurt? And I go, that's interesting. I go, let me ask you a question. What happens if someone in the fire services gets hurt? And again, at that time, I was the fire chief. So it really kind of held some credibility that I was representing both organizations. I go, if the fire services can do this, why can't the police department do it? And they said, well, we're not gonna be able to do it. So I didn't let that go, obviously. And I pushed it even further. And I wrote up about the reduction of cortisol levels and how that's important and how we need our people to be healthy for our communities, right? Not just for themselves, and what cortisol levels the reduction will do for us and our community. And I sent this forward, and I have the report if anybody needs this. And the answer finally was, we don't know why you can't, right? Fire services has been doing it, but you can't do it. why? And I said, if someone can give me a real reason why we can't do this, then I'll walk away. But until then, I'm going to be persistent because I think it's important and I'm really motivated to get this done and accomplished. And here we are, we were able to do that. So without getting into, too in depth with it, Janice could please reach out. But what we do is we have them work out on duty. We extend their lunch period. They're allowed to work out during their lunch period. Of course, they have to be subject to radio traffic because we have a small organization, but they have their radios on. They're allowed to get undressed and be able to work out. But the thing is, you have to understand that sometimes it's not an entitlement, right? So you've got calls for service going on. You're not entitled to work out, but we provide that opportunity for anybody who wants to work out. So I'm hoping that answers Janice's question, but I'll be more than happy to talk to her offline a little bit more if she has any problems.
Yeah, that's great. I think that answers probably something everybody wants to know because of it being so important. Like when I'm hearing from you that it happens during lunch schedule and they get their lunch extended is a short answer to it, right?
That's correct.
Got it. Thank you. That's really helpful. It is so important.
Would you go ahead and reshare your screen? We've had a request for the QR code for the Asher model. Do you have that slide that you can put up while we finish answering questions?
No, they need to send a self-addressed stamped envelope with a check. Yes, absolutely.
I see lots of thank yous and thank you from a whole bunch of people. And I also have folks here. I'm trying to get my chat back up. Sorry, it just got transferred across to a different screen when we started switching. We had another question on here, Chief, and it was, we have Chief, thank you so much on behalf of the men and women from the Kauai Police Department. Awesome presentation. That's from a fellow chief over on Kauai PD, Bryson. He's a friend of ours and just really great guy. Thanks, Bryson. I need to scroll up so far to find the comments, questions, because everybody is so smitten with your presentation, Chief.
I'm getting to that.
I like this comment from Brian Wilson. He says, "When it matters most, call for backup." Right? And I don't know if that's a statement that you had said or if he says this, but I think we call for backup when you have high intensity calls, hot calls. Isn't suicide a hot call? I mean, isn't your own mental health a hot call where you should have, these hot tones going off, saying, wow, alert, I'm not doing well.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about the science of awe, and I'll share a little bit more when we have a little bit more in tuned and be able to share that with people. But we're also building a platform into where you get red flags, like if somebody's gone through 3 major traumatic events in the first quarter of that year, it automatically is going to trigger a mental health checkup, right? And I don't use the term, and I want people to listen, don't use the term fit for duty. And if that's part of your policy, you need to remove that. These aren't fit for duty tests. These are just mental health checkups, right? We don't get reports back. We're not trying to see if they're fit. We just want to make sure our people are healthy. So understand that. So again, building out the ways to track traumatic calls, and then being able to send people that are reaching some threshold to a mental health checkup just to make sure they're okay. I do want to mention something that I didn't bring up was that, we talk about the hot calls and we need backup. We also have to think of like the airline services, right? They talk about this all the time, and I'll use it, the oxygen mask analogy. You have to put the mask on yourself before you can help others, right? Or help other people with their masks. Same thing here. We need to pour out into ourselves to make sure we're healthy so we can help others. So it's really, really important to understand that self-care for the leadership of these professions is really, really important. This isn't just for our people, but it's for us as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief. I want to also say here that I think this probably happens to other people too, but we also had another question from Janice, and she said, what do you do when your new leadership command, so it's a former retired department leader, tells the department that morale is not his problem?
Look for a new leader. That's ridiculous. That, we keep talking about, we talk about the change in leadership, right? We have to be vulnerable. We need leaders that understand that human capital is our number one the bottom line is our profession, we've had militaristic type of leaders, autocratic leaders. We're transitioning out of that now, right? Our organizations aren't machines anymore. They're more of learning organizations, learning as a brain, basically. We need leadership to adjust as well. Be vulnerable. We need new leadership that understands that human capital is where it's at. We have to invest in our people. Morale is all of our problems, from the top all the way down to the first officer that comes in the organization. So anybody that wants to remove themselves from that, I think has a disconnect to what our profession needs right now. Not to insult anybody.
That's a great answer. I also tell folks too, we are in a customer service-based industry, whether you want to believe it or not. That's what we do, right? We provide customer service to the community. Here's where it falls short, and you tell me your opinion on this. We forget to provide good customer service to the people that we work with. We spend it all day long on strangers that we'll probably never meet again, and we do not provide it to our family and to our coworkers. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So I'm certainly not a Richard Branson fan at all. Not to insult Richard Branson, I think he's a very intelligent gentleman. But I learned something from him, and I read an article of his one time. And what he said was, customer service don't come first in my businesses, my people do. And if you take care of your people, you'll never have to worry about taking care of your customers. That's a different business model, right? We always throw customers come first, and when we come to police departments, the community comes first. Sometimes our leadership in our organizations will listen and fall on the side of somebody who's making a complaint before we even talk to the officer, right? They're guilty until proven innocent. Well, so here's the problem. Again, it's that paradigm switch to understand that customers don't come first. Our employees do. Let's take care of our people, and our people will take care of our customers. We'll never have to worry about that.
That's a great answer, man. Thank you. Thank you very much. I wanna introduce you to a friend of mine. Come here, Michelle. Come here. This is a friend of mine. This is the newest chief of police here for Jackson Hole PD. She just popped by to say hi. She's on a trip down here to Phoenix, and this is my friend Neil Gang and the rest of the world, Michelle. She was just involved in a high intensity thing here, as you could imagine, with the case that happened up in her neck of the woods. It's gonna disappeared, and so.
Well, let her know certainly that we sometimes you need to be able to vent, to colleagues, right? And it doesn't, it's really hard for chiefs right now, particularly in the ever-changing environment we're in, with the stresses that we have, to go to our own peer support team. So understand that she can reach out to me at any time. I'm on LinkedIn. Connect with me. You can call me anytime. I don't know any more than you do. I just been doing it a little bit longer, and I'll be more happy to help anybody through any situation that they're in. You know what? Because most of us have gone through those types of situations before. So reach out to each other, reach out to the same peer, so you can keep that confidentiality and not have to feel that you're addressing down a little bit. So we're here for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
Look at that, dude. You don't only sell the product, you practice it. Thanks, Michelle. I'll see you in a minute. All right. Hey, Chief, thank you very much, my friend. It's great seeing you. Great spending time with you. A great presentation. Fantastic. You could stay on here, read the comments, engage with people if you can. And we are going to, as promised, we'll take a 2-minute break, and then we'll transition across to Lindsay, who's going to come on next.
Dr. Dara, thanks so much for having me. Really, really blessed for this opportunity. I look forward to working with you. You know that you and I have been friends for a little bit, but really, really blessed to be a part of what you're doing, and look forward to further collaborations with you. I will stay on probably for the next half hour or so to answer any questions. If they have anything, this chat, I'll be monitoring the chat, and I'll answer you through the chat. And if not, reach out on LinkedIn. I'm always here for you. And if you want a coin and you can commit to those 2 things I asked, send me your information and I'll have one out to you real soon.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. Have a great day. Be blessed.
Thanks, buddy. You too.